A long three.
Oh, dude, you know I like the long three.
Dude.
One.
Say no more. You have to.
Three. Or wait, I count down. 3.
Wait, are you saying that you have a long 3? Or...
Yeah, dude, it's a long 3. It's like a 3.7.
It's a long 3. It's like Anthony Fantano type.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a strong 3.
Yeah. Long 3.
It's a strong to girthy to long 3. It's a 3 with some meat on its bones. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Paul, you were saying we always joke about fuck Mondays, but then you're like Tuesday's like double Monday.
Dude, you fucked me up with that shit today.
Yeah, it's double Monday.
And Wednesday's like triple Monday.
Triple Monday. It just gets worse and worse.
I definitely...
Yeah, and I was like, no. I hate the whole week now.
I don't know if I definitely... I don't know about Wednesday, but for you, dear listener, we're recording this episode on a Tuesday evening because... for various reasons, but Paul,
don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't. What do you fucking want to get in our lives, dude?
Yeah, fucking back off.
Nosy. If you do want to get in our lives, you can subscribe to our Patreon because you get to join our popping Discord channel.
Yeah,
yes.
Which is popping off. Shout outs to the Discord.
Yeah, right now it's kind of the 3-body problem, but
no, there's like 5 bodies.
Okay.
Yeah. 6.
No, for real, it's fun, and it would become exponentially more fun with more people.
And you would learn about our personal lives a little bit because we can't help posting about them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. We're discussing modern subjects, constantly performing and shaving off hair-thin little slices of ourselves and psyches.
That's right. So subscribe to the Patreon, subscribe to the YouTube, go to our Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Not Facebook, really, who cares? Instagram, Twitter, Patreon.
Now with all those
YouTube.
Revelations, right, Gabe?
What revelations?
Now with all that whistleblower, so we can't take the heat right now.
The whistleblower.
Yeah, whistle lady.
Who, speaking of personal lives, looks like Paul's ex-girlfriend.
Not a girlfriend. But she did. I was actually like freaked out when I was driving when you sent that, and I was like, what? She is?
You could be forgiven for like a quick look at that picture thinking that was her.
It looked so much like her. Yeah.
It's really funny.
Oh.
Very similar. Shout outs to the Facebook whistleblower. I don't even know her name off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But anyway.
That's not what we're here to discuss.
No.
No.
This is, of course, in case you were fucking wondering.
Confused,
lost. Spine Crackers.
The podcast
You know and love. I'm Matt.
I'm Gabe.
I'm Paul.
And,
I'm Paul.
We're here to talk about books, baby.
And in particular...
A book, specifically.
A book today. And that book is Gabriel's Pick.
Yeah, so today we are talking about Exit West, which is...
Exit?
Exit?
How do you say exit?
Did I say it weird?
You
Exit.
said it like exit.
Exit. I say exit normally. I don't know why I said exit if I did. How do you say it, Matt?
Exit.
Exit, right?
Like there's a Z in there. Exit.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Is exit like a non-American thing, or is even in America do some people say it that way?
Exit.
We're getting in the weeds so fast.
If there's any linguistics podcasts,
Hey, books have words in them.
That's
Books
right.
have words.
If there's
That's
any-
true, and honestly, it's a stumper. I don't know because
Yeah.
that sounds more correct in a way.
Well, because there
yeah.
are a lot of things that are said, and I don't mean different words like pop and soda or whatever, but just pronunciation of the same word can be very different.
Yeah, like people say because differently. Some people say like because. I've heard that before.
Because.
Who says that?
That's a weird one.
The guy who played Mark Zuckerberg in
Jesse Eisenberg?
Jesse Eisenberg. I've heard him say because in interviews, and it like stuck out to me. It was very strange.
How do you? Okay, here's one though. Real quick. How do you say spider?
Spider.
Spider.
Oh, see, you say it weird.
Matt
Me?
does?
Yeah.
Spider.
All right, do it again. Matt.
Spider.
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 So me and Paul say it the same. We say I like I
Spidey.
like spider,
Spidey.
and you say spider like SPEYEDER.
Well, no, just how it is because that's how you fucking say it.
Matt's big mad.
Spider.
Matt's big mad.
Along came a spider
you
and
don't
sat
say-
down beside her. Why do you
Yeah.
think that Miss Muffet works, bitch?
Oh, okay, that's actually fair. But isn't that like
Matt,
how do you British? Is that British?
Matt, how do you
can
say
still
wrong?
say spider and beside her.
Matt, how
What?
do you say wrong?
Wrong.
That's what you are.
That was a joke about
That was a
being wrong.
joke
You
because
are
you're wrong.
about spider.
No. But I was just pointing out that there are multiple. My wife
not a gotcha.
says spider. So
Well, we're all from the same region, so
it is interesting that Matt says it differently. Anyway, we're talking about Iksit West by Mohsin Hamid, which is his novel from 2017. I think it's his.
I actually have a pronunciation change because I listened to this whole book on audiobook.
Oh shit!
And he pronounced his own name Mohsin Hamid.
Oh, Mohsin Hamid. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mohsin Hamid.
That's helpful.
Yeah. Which it wasn't until the very end he was like, "I'm Mohsin Hamid, and this is the book I read."
Oh, okay.
Oh, did he read it to
his
you?
own book? That's
He read
interesting.
it. Yeah,
How was that?
it was good. He has a great voice, soothing.
he does. He really does.
Yeah, he actually does have a really nice voice.
He's got that beautiful like Pakistani British mix. It's nice.
Yes. So yeah, Matt, as Matt just mentioned, he's a Pakistani British author, and British in the sense I'm assuming that his parents were British because he was born in Pakistan.
Yeah.
But his parents I know are also of like Pakistani heritage, but I'm just assuming that they were born in England and then he was born in Pakistan or something like that. Because it said Pakistani British, but he has not really spent much time actually in England. He was born in Pakistan and educated in the United States mostly. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm assuming
he-
just I'm assuming his parents were British.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. He's definitely got quite the CV and quite the pedigree.
Yeah, so
Educationally and all this.
I'm glad you brought this up actually because I wanted to talk about it before we get into the book too much, because I had mixed feelings about this book in a lot of different ways that we can get it. We'll obviously get into most of them, but when I was doing a little research on I kind of picked it because I guess I should talk about that. I kind of picked it because one, I've been for the last couple picks at least trying to like correct for a bias that we have had in our picks for a while for older texts, which is great and fine, but we have read, I think this will be like our fourth text published since 2000 or 2010 maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
So we skew older, and so I've been sort of trying to consciously correct for that.
Or ageist, but in a Benjamin Button type way.
Was Benjamin Button ageist? The people around him were probably ageist.
That metaphor sounds like it works, but it doesn't.
No, it doesn't at all.
Just trying to spice it up.
So I was doing some research, and so that's basically why I picked it. And it popped up, I was just kind of starting with, some of the basic places that you start when you look for good recent books, which are various kind of publications, top 10 lists. And indeed, this book was one of the top 10 books of 2017 from the New York Times book review and stuff like that. And this one came up on a few. And so I thought we could give it a shot. So that's basically why I picked it. And it seems kind of topical and relevant and whatever. There's refugee crisis and, the wake of sort of Afghanistan and blah, 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 blah. But I was doing some research into Hamid as a person, and Matt mentioned already he's got sort of a pretty high-class educational pedigree. I think like a Princeton undergrad and Harvard Law School and,
Yes, sir.
the whole nine yards. And I came across the fact that he did time working for everyone's favorite global evil hegemonic organization, McKinsey.
Yeah.
One of the absolute most malignant, horrible forces operating on the global socio-political landscape today, I would argue. Shout outs to Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
Did you catch that, Matt, when you were?
Yeah, the thing that caught my eye right away. Well, I mean, again, all biases right up front, right? Like, just in general. First of all, just the book and its cover. Just New York Times prestige, sort of Oscar bait, but in book form.
Classic
kind of thing.
New York Times bestseller fodder, yeah.
Yeah, just kind of like I had my my hackles up a bit with that, or whatever the turn of phrase is. My defense is up, I guess.
No, I think hackles up.
Like,
hackles up
is
like
right.
Right.
Blue. It's just a blue cover with the sticker.
Oh.
There. What?
Pish posh, Paul.
No, the font and the dot, the starry dots.
Yeah, what is this, a John Green book? Like, come on.
You guys are acting like you went to Princeton.
Okay, that's fair. That's
That's
actually
fair. Except this guy did, and
So
He's
therefore he sucks.
well, he was. I just noticed that right away. Also, like second build to his, career as author was brand consultant, which I've
Yes.
never seen on another writer featured so prominently. And he's like the chief storytelling. The chief storytelling officer of like
of himself.
of like fucking I forget what it is. Some brand, Wolf Olin's brand consultancy firm in London and stuff. So I don't know, just noticing these things.
And in this edition of the book, he's very branded. His picture is in here like 4 times.
Yeah.
Or at least 2 or 3. Which I don't know how common that is in these sorts of newer, like I said, we don't read a lot of books of this sort of New York Times bestseller type. So maybe that's the thing now. Of course, no tea, no shade. Being an author is incredibly difficult, and you need to be good at branding. So he's good at it. Good for him. Like knock yourself out.
He works for a brand consultancy. He must know what he's doing a little bit.
Right, for sure. And like, just on the point of the cover, like there just is a style, right? There just is. Like to Paul's skepticism of our skepticism.
I mean, it kind of looks like it's like saltwater taffy candy colors to me.
Ooh, yeah, I could definitely see the saltwater
Right?
taffy.
That
The little
blue
flex.
and the other blue.
The little flecks of the salt crystals.
And so, okay, anyway,
Yes.
we bring all this up,
Sea
or
salt.
I bring this up, not to, preemptively, write the book off or anything, but to sort of contextualize where we were coming from, at least me and to some degree Matt, going into it, potentially.
Yeah, I went in cold turkey.
Yeah.
And I have issues with this book, but they're probably already different than the issues you have.
Yeah, well,
Maybe.
Again,
Maybe.
like I said, nothing that I've said so far is an issue with the book. I'm just kind of like contextualizing where I was coming from, because like I will just say my political leanings, make me talk about getting hackles up. If I see McKinsey anywhere around someone's name, I see red.
Yeah.
Just because they just are an evil organization. I don't want to get into it. You can go look that up and talk about it somewhere else on the Discord when you join our Patreon.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But
And those of you listeners that don't know what they're talking about, I don't either. So we can go on the ride together.
yeah. Shout outs.
Is that related to the Kingsman movies? Or, like Mr. Kingsley? What are you talking about?
McKinsey. That's the name of it. It's a consulting firm, and they do a bunch of work for all sorts of organizations, from like weapons manufacturers to governments and all kinds of bad actors in between.
So, I was imagining more like a left wing PragerU type deal, but it's not that.
No.
Oh, I assumed that it was like a left wing organization.
No, well, I mean they're politically neutral in the sense that they're a capitalist organization and they make money off of
Valueless.
whoever. Yeah. But
They're one of the big 3 consulting firms. They're like, just
who
like
are the
one
other
of the
2?
big-
I'm curious.
I can't remember,
Okay.
but yeah, it's like, yeah.
How long was his stint there? Do you know?
That's a good question. It doesn't. I don't know how long he was actually there. I mean, okay. One thing that I will say that I thought was kind of based about his background was that he gets a law degree from Harvard Law School and apparently just decided that doing law is fucking boring and just quit.
Yeah.
Which is pretty based. And then
That's Chad.
You know, the generous way of reading it is then he then goes to McKinsey, who apparently in his contract or something allotted him 3 months out of the year to just work on his writing. And so he just got fucking paid presumably out the ass and only had to work 12 minus 3? 9 months out of the year, which is pretty epic.
Yeah. He basically paid off his student loans and then also got this sweet like kind of summers off kind of deal to write and wrote
almost like an
lots.
academic appointment.
Yeah, very nice deal.
Which you know, that's actually pretty epic.
Yeah, who knows if anyone was in that situation? If you know, maybe he had issues with the company too, but he just
of course
was like, I can work in my writing. I feel like
Well, I think he must. I think he must.
Potential.
I mean, definitely just like
given the content of this book, I can't imagine that he supports everything McKinsey does.
No, yeah, like you know, whatever he did to get paid with his prestigious education and all that. You know how the some of the misgivings I have about what I think he believes about like human beings and blah 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 is just of a different order than, you know, being associated with an evil consulting firm.
Yeah, and you know, I'll give a slight spoiler alert here, because one of the other reasons that I bring this up at the beginning is because in a lot of ways, you know, because I was thinking, okay, this is just going to be like a cynical kind of like, you know, clout grab, and I'm going to write a story about refugees, and everyone's going to love it, and blah 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 blah, from someone who, you know, worked for a firm that does horrible shit around the world and probably contributes to that crisis. Yeah, exactly. But you know, spoiler alert, the book won me over in a lot of ways to kind of overcome that bias that I had coming in. So we'll talk about that. Not in all ways, but in a number of them. And we'll talk about all that stuff in the episode to come.
Probably like 4 hours from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
So do you want to do like a broad strokes, I guess?
Yeah.
Wait, first, Gabe, why did you choose this book?
I said that already.
Yeah. Don't run it back.
We just spent 20 minutes on it. Hey, listen, a Clifford Lee Sargent video on this book would be over already.
That is true. Yes.
So you're getting more bang for your buck.
We're not even wearing leather jackets.
Podcast, yeah.
Ridge Wallet, Bloodless Idealism. Fucking catch you later.
Get the coffee.
Yeah.
Really, his actual discussion of the book would be over at like 12 minutes, but there'd be 6 more of him doing his coffee fucking Ridge Wallet plugging.
NFT. Yeah.
All right. Anyway, so the book is about
Is soaking his Ridge Wallet in coffee and blood.
and having sex with it.
Just dunking it, rubbing on his private area.
Sex and death, dude. Sex, death, and coffee.
And Ridge Wallet.
Okay, so the book follows 2 characters, and I believe they're the only 2 named characters in the entire novel.
Yes.
I don't think anyone else gets a name. Saeed and Nadia. Is that how he pronounces them when he reads it, Paul?
He pronounces Nadia, but he pronounces Saeed as Said.
Said?
Yeah, like
Okay.
Said.
Said. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
No, it's like Said. Like
Said.
Said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Said.
And they are, you know, young. I forget exactly how young. I don't know if they're given specific ages. Like 20 somethings, I think is presumed. who are kind of taking night classes and living and working in an unnamed Middle Eastern city. They meet at a night course they are taking, I believe on is it on branding? Is
it's
it on
brand
business branding?
consulting,
Brand
yeah,
consulting,
or something. Yeah.
Which who knows what there is to be made
Right
of
when you
that.
know.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right when you know, exactly. And they
they met at University of Phoenix, basically.
University of Phoenix is all online, man. No in-person University of Phoenix classes, as far as I know.
Oh, that's true. I did a report on them in college.
Did you?
And I forgot. Yeah, I did. I had to do a 10-page paper and a presentation.
Relevant in the sense that, no offense to any of our listeners, University of Phoenix, up there with McKinsey for one of the most evil organizations in the contemporary world.
See, that I don't know about.
All online for-profit universities, I would put in that category.
ITT Tech.
Yes, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Southern New Hampshire University or whatever the fuck. Yeah.
They just take tuition money and put it into marketing, and they have great commercials. And that's the majority of where their tuition money goes.
I
see.
That would be.
And they're like,
that's a can of worms.
yeah.
But so
Patreon
anyway,
only.
Patreon only, exactly. Discord only.
Yes.
So they meet in this night class, and they essentially engage in this courtship. Obviously, this is a deeply Islamic culture, and there's all sorts of rules about women being alone and with men and so on and so forth. And so they have to do a lot of song and dance in order to meet up with each other and see each other. And they sort of engage in this process. And in the background, there's this kind of, civil unrest happening where a militant, hyper religious group is essentially slowly starting to kind of encroach into their city. And there are kind of escalating military conflicts that happen in and around their places of business and their homes. And we do meet, at least we meet Said. Like Marquis de Sade, but Said.
Said, like.
All right, I'm just going to say that.
Mispronounce that to get this right.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he said something to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we do meet Said's family. I don't think we actually meet Nadia's family, although we do hear about them a few times. Is that right? As far as you remember?
We just get her like sort of a 1 paragraph rundown of like why her relationship with her family fell apart and why she's more like independent.
Yes, and so she's kind of living on her own as a young woman in this context, which is frowned upon and variously persecuted and so on and so forth. Said is sort of more traditionally inclined, and that plays out in the rest of the book, I think, in a really interesting way, the way they kind of go down those paths. But he's still young, and he's kind of, they smoke weed together and do mushrooms at one point early on in the book, and so on and so forth. So we're not talking about, sort of extreme fundamentalist people here. And I think that's meant to contrast with the people who are kind of encroaching and militarily taking over the city. So this is all going on, and ultimately the militants, which is the way they're referred to, I think, in the text, they essentially take control of the city, and things start to deteriorate, lockdowns and sort of extrajudicial killings and so on and so forth. And there start to be these rumors circulating around about doors. We don't really get much more than that. There are just these doors that sort of appear seemingly at random, that if you walk through them, you're transported to essentially a random location in the world. That is not where you are. It's consistent in the sense that if two people go through the same door, they will wind up in the same place, but any given door will take you somewhere random. So yeah. And so there's that kind of, there's
Harry
this
Potter Yeah.
I was gonna say Chronicles of Narnia.
Monsters Inc. Yeah, whatever.
But so there's this like magical realist element to the narrative, right? Which I know.
It's like a vanishing cabinet, but it's a door.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
And of course,
The Dark Tower.
Yeah, and so these doors sort of become a means of potential escape. Ultimately, there's a lot we can talk about. I'm moving fast. They ultimately go through one together, and they wind up originally on the Greek island of Mykonos, and they stay there for a little while, and shit happens, and then they move to they go through another door, and they wind up in London. And shit happens, and they go through another one, and they wind up in a town, which I didn't bother to look if this is a real town, but in the book it's called Marin. Is that right?
Marin County, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Marin. Okay.
Marin, yeah.
Yeah, in California, outside of San Francisco.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where they wind up, and they kind of, it's sort of a description of their lives and their relationship through this process, and that's the book.
Yeah, the through line is obviously, and Hamid makes certain of this, like the two named characters. It's like a love story, or it's like not a love story. It's a story about a relationship that begins and ends.
Yes,
basically.
right.
So it's like that's the kind of backbone, I guess, through which he tries to discuss a bunch of different things.
And the other thing that I would just note is that while the story, and I think this is one thing that Hamid does really well, is that we have two named characters. The story follows them for the most part. There are these kind of like little vignettes that he throws in about other stories of people in various far-flung places of the world, and sort of their encounter with these doors, and with the sort of concept of refugeeism. Is that a word? What am I trying to say here?
I
think that is a word, actually.
If it is then I'm using it.
I think I've heard it on Fox News.
That's probably right.
That was delivered that punchline by getting eating the mic. I like that.
Perfect. So there are other significant stories peppered throughout the book. But I don't know how you all felt about this, but they Said and Nadia, they are the main characters, but in a lot of ways to me they don't feel like the main characters in a good way. Like they are a sort of I don't want to. I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this. I don't want to say they're a conduit, because it's not like they're underdeveloped or something for Hamid to make a political point. I'm not trying to say that at all. But like, it's clear throughout the story that they are fitting into something bigger that's going on, I guess, if that makes sense.
They're small protagonists.
Yes. Yes.
Something like that. Yeah, I think right off the bat, like, why do you think he... Well, I think he was trying to create a sense of... Or the ability for everyone to kind of identify and bring their own subjective experiences to it or whatever, but, like, did you feel there was a necessity to not name where they're from, but have it be sort of vaguely recognizable as Middle Eastern with, this fundamentalist sort of, I don't know, threat around the edges and stuff? Like, why not say where it was? Is that just too loaded, or what's he doing?
I actually like that decision on his part, because it opens it up, and it can become more abstract for people that aren't from that region, and less personal for people that are from that region, or even more personal for people that are from a city like that. So I like that. The non-naming of...
Yeah, I agree. I definitely liked the choice, and I think, I'm not saying you didn't, Matt, but I think it's a good question, because I think, a lot of what Paul said, you're able to abstract a little bit more, and also I just think, like, it kind of shields the book a little bit from the accusation of being, like, too explicitly political or something. in the sense that it's like, you know, because you can just, you know, if you're writing a book about a specific city in a specific place, inevitably you are going to become embroiled a little bit in the specific details of that specific place, right? Like a militant takeover of, you know, Beirut is going to be different than a militant takeover of Islamabad, is going to be different than a militant takeover of Kabul, is going to be different than a militant takeover of, you know, whatever. And so I think like it's a way of kind of avoiding what are essentially irrelevant kind of parochial details to the stories he's trying to tell and the points he's trying to make.
I also, just to keep going, there was a point in the book, later in the book, where I think they're in London, and they're in a house full of mostly Nigerians. And I remember, I remember just like, you know, hearing, because I listened to an audiobook because I'm a loser. I remember hearing Nigerian and being like, oh, I'm thinking of Nigerians now and what my idea of what a Nigerian refugee is, which is still vague. But because Said and Nadia were not named, that became more abstract for me, and I was just thinking like they could, you know, it actually made me think of them more as individuals, which maybe was the main takeaway. Like you know they're refugees, you know their country is under attack or whatever, and they had to escape. But I think he wanted to focus on their relationship and their characterizations,
which I think
across to Westerners.
I actually think on that point, last thing, and I'm gonna let you finish, Matt, Kanye West style.
Yeah.
But on that exact point, I think that at first I was like, okay, why is he naming where the other refugees are from, but not where Said and Nadia are from? And I wonder if that reaction that you had when he starts talking about the Nigerian refugees wasn't intentional on Hamid's part to kind of illustrate this reaction that we have, where, as you said, like, oh, Nigerian refugees, something pops up in my head, but it's not particularly well defined. It's not, and then of course you start to kind of homogenize and reduce and so on and so forth. And so I wonder if that wasn't an intentional decision to kind of say, like, you know, look, once you put a country, once you put a place of origin to a person, you are, at least in the mind of your sort of typical Westerner, you're going to get an image in your head. You just are, whether you want to or not, right?
Yeah, Mac, you can go, and then I'll make a point about that. I'll write it down.
No, go right now while it's still hot, fresh.
I was just going to say that, like, it makes me think of like subconscious bias racism in a book form.
100%.
This clearly, to me, like, defined that idea as possibly being real for sure. Just in what we're talking about right now, like, yeah,
it is. You know, it's
yeah. But Gabe, are you saying that it wasn't intentional, or was?
No, I'm saying I think it probably was intentional.
Okay.
Because that part of the book in particular, that's sort of at the back half, and then they're starting to get into, I mean, at that point, the sort of magical device of these doors that teleport you all over the world is starting to really like take effect. I think once he starts naming names, like place names and countries, it's exactly that. It's like you create a loose association in your head, if you're from there or not, and the action of the book is mirroring potentially that, where the Nigerians are grouping and everyone's grouping together, and Said is seeking people from where he's from, and you know that process is taking hold as they're under siege from what Hamid just calls the nativists. You know.
Well, I think he calls at the beginning of that section, because eventually the people of London kind of split into a couple groups too, right? But he at one point, and I think this was a really smart word choice, he just calls them the natives.
Yeah,
the natives. Yeah. Oh, you're right. I didn't really pick up on that, but that is good. And I think one of the trickinesses of that tactic, and like not saying where Said and Nadia are from, and trying to keep things vague so that they can be more capacious for personal meanings that you bring to it, is that in a lot of like kind of humanist vague ways, you do lose that particularity, which is like kind of the essence a lot of the time of the crisis. And that was one of those things that like, at times it was like really elegantly put, and I felt a very like deep humanist warmth, coming from the book at Hamid's effort. But at the same time, I was also like, occasionally I felt like he was he was abstracting to the degree where it was just like, in this house we believe women's rights. You know what I mean? Like just like that kind of like stuff, that kind of vibe started to creep in every now and again.
And I do think, it is worth saying that, despite all of the kind of benefits that we think there might be to that, there is a kind of cynical read, which I think you're hinting at, Matt, which is sort of like
always
the like, Western liberated woman doing mushrooms and living on her own and so on, reading this book and being like, oh my God, look, refugees, they're just like us. And kind of trying to elicit that reaction via the abstraction from particularities of place and time. And I think that that's a really fucking razor thin, like line to walk. And, we can talk about how well Hamid does it here. And I think probably he veers back and forth across it at various points.
It's as thin as a New York Times book review face mask.
Yes.
Was this
shit?
You
just put it on and wash it off 5 minutes later.
Dude, was this when did Trump do the like travel ban? Or not the travel ban because that's COVID wording, but like the Muslim travel ban.
That was probably like 6 months in, so like 2000.
That was early on, I think. So
it was probably still 2016.
Yeah.
So assuming that he wasn't writing this book, or assuming he was writing it in 2016.
I think so.
He must have been. Let's see.
I mean, it's tough. Like the issue of just refugees and people fleeing and migrating and all this kind of stuff is.
So I don't know. I'm sorry. Just because I found it, I don't know when this book came out exactly in 2017, but the Muslim ban was signed in January of 2017. So.
Right. Just maybe just a like one of those sick coincidences, but obviously like. You can read the room, globally speaking, and be like, okay, like this, like I was, I guess, just vaguely hinting at like a good book's about the issue of like refugees, or not the issue necessarily, but just like the fact of it. I do want, like it's like one of those things that needs to be talked about and not just like academically or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's one of the other dimensions of that razor line, right? Where how do we balance? And I guess this is what I was trying to say earlier, inelegantly, but how do you balance the important realities of particularities of place and context without getting into a fucking 800-page historical document about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Well, that's funny because
there's a place for that academic stuff,
for sure,
and there's a place not for it, and Hamid falls squarely on the not academic side of that line, but where that line exactly is, I think, is really an interesting question.
It's funny you use the word particularities, because I was just going to ask you guys if I mean, I think you're already getting at it, but like, do you think this book greatly suffers from lack of particularities? And also, I mean, do you think it suffers from the main magical realist element of the novel being like just an escape hatch door that's magical that can get you to a different location to continue the story? But I mean, I think that the lack of the descriptions about escaping and how you would escape and how to immigrate and run away from the conflict, that seems to be like probably one of the main juicy aspects of a story like that. So I was actually really confused about that choice to just have it like an open door where you're magically in a new place. I don't totally understand that choice storytelling wise.
Well, I listened to a couple talks he gave about it and whatever. And so he has a reason, like it falls in line with some of the other stuff we've been talking about, which is just not creating those particularities, I guess, that would cause you to think yourself as different from other people. That was his rationale that he was saying. I was listening to he's talking to like his like the requisite like politics and prose, discussion of the book, and he was just saying like all of that like kind of trauma, like fucking floating on a rubber raft to like across the ocean to like land starving on the shore, or, like having
like it's done too many times too, maybe, or just
having some like shady coyote smuggler guy like take you through tunnels under the desert out into like onto the Texan border and all this kind of shit. It's like his rationale was that all of that kind of like drama that is kind of juicy for like a story. With those doors, his thing was he was kind of like actively trying to just completely excise that part of the narrative and just be like,
which
they just
I
go
actually,
somewhere.
I mean, I don't know if I totally agree with the execution of the book, but I actually kind of like that as like a motive for storytelling, in a way, like because it did make me think more humanistically about the characters, and I think a story that dives too deep into that make you think about certain ethnic groups as only being people that are trying to escape or something.
And the doors like you need this sort of I kind of have a problem with it. I don't see why you couldn't have this empathetic account that includes what is arguably some of the most important parts of the process of being a refugee. You know what I mean? Like the trouble with getting from point A to point B is a huge problem. You know what I mean? And like, or is like what's at issue a lot of the time with the process itself. But I get what he's saying, but he also needs the doors to be magical and like just teleport you places like Harry Potter, because he needs to ultimately get to the sort of conclusion where everyone's everywhere, which is kind of also his point, and he can't do that if it's just normal, escaping.
The process would take a lot longer and be.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like.
But also, it could have taken like a few more pages to just explain how they got to a different city. It could have. I don't know. I think in general, I feel
I don't
like
know about that.
I think I mean, it might have been like less believable or something going from like London to like an area around San Francisco, I guess. But I think it was a misuse of magical realism overall.
I'm really glad you brought it up, Paul, because this was the doors for me. Excuse me. Were I had a lot of tension with the doors, both politically in terms of how to interpret the book and literarily in terms of the way they're used, because so literarily, just to start, like I liked the concept and the sort of like magical realism element. I almost wish he had played it up even more. Like I almost wish it had been an even greater force in the narrative and sort of gone into an even more detail.
Definitely.
It almost feels like he didn't fully commit to it in a way. Because like
you could almost read by it.
It's such a
honestly.
Yeah,
you could read right by it.
It's such a fantastical, like weird element that I had read a bit of a summary or some reviews of the book before I started reading it, and I was like, oh, this is going to be like the center point of the book, these doors. And it very much isn't.
It's a lot of people's beef with the book too.
What, that point?
A lot of the like sort of I loved this but or I hated this kind of hinged on that.
Yeah.
Pun intended.
Well, I think it's easy at this point to relate, Murakami and magical realism, and I think that Murakami goes into the particulars. They still end up being vague, and you end up like, what was this book about? But at least they're like specific, and
he's making spaghetti and he's going to the bathroom and he's drinking a glass of water. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And this door looks like a spaghetti door, and yeah. But there's a lot of stuff that I just had issues with. It's like, why? So can only the refugees use the doors for one thing?
No.
So like
No, because there is a moment in the book, and I thought this was really interesting in the sense that it was one of those brief glimpses into like, how would this actually play out? Like, what are these doors? Give me more doors. I almost like I kind of wanted them to take even more of a center stage, because there's a moment in the book where I think they're in London, and the militants actually start using the doors to go into London and do terrorist attacks and then leave to try to turn public opinion against the refugees, to try to prevent more people from leaving, essentially, or to make it harder for them to stay in the places that they wind up. And so he explores in a couple brief, it's literally like a paragraph or two, brief ways, the some of the implications or how the sort of like logistics of these doors might actually play out. And as you say, Matt, by the end of the book, they've kind of spread worldwide. But I guess just as a literary device, I don't know. I felt like I wanted more of it. If you're gonna go there, like, I wanted more commitment.
Yeah, I agree, because like Paul said, you could just sort of almost forget that was a part of it, even though it's kind of emphasized for decent chunks of the book. And you're like, there's these. The first scene in which a door, I think, was technically being used was it intentionally meant to look like a break-in, I think.
Yeah.
With like what?
Shout out to my neighbors.
Oh, it's their dog. So many dogs around you. But yeah, I did just I wanted more.
And a few scenes at the beginning, they were so tantalizing, right? Where you see predictably that these doors become politicized, they become capitalized, right? There are if someone finds a door, they instantly like hire security guards and like
they're selling tickets.
Selling tickets, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's this big clandestine production for them to actually get through the door. And those were some of the parts of the book just from like a maybe like a dumb spy novel perspective or something like that. I was like, this is juicy. I like this. And I kind of wanted that to be played up a little bit more than I feel like it was.
The other thing, again, and this is, I don't know how I feel about this, but I in that talk I was listening to him give, it's almost like Black Mirror level symbolism, but like the door is a black I don't know, opening portal. It's rectangular, and he legit was like thinking of like phones, because like there is one of his points, and again, this is a sort of like tech fetish fucking TED Talk kind of, I don't know, opinion to have about technology, but like it's the weirdness of it's like, erasing space and time, and then also it's like liberatory potential as like something that erases borders and ceases to create these artificial differences or something.
And because earlier on in the book, that is the phone. That's interesting that you bring that up, because earlier on in the book, the phone is kind of the way Sade and Nadia are able to communicate kind of like free of, the various restrictions that are placed on their activity, even in their city, even before the militant takeover. So I think it fits symbolically with that kind of concern.
They're like your average millennials, you know.
Right.
They're always on their dang phone.
Always on their dang phone, sending nudes. I don't think they send nudes, but
Yeah, just ankle pictures and stuff.
no.
Unlike some of us, ankle pictures. Oh my god.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think there's a bit of like this reification of technology or something going on a bit, where it's like this will force the issue, or the internet will force the issue that we're actually all human beings. God damn it, not different.
But I mean, I will say, just to push back a little bit on that, I do think you're totally right about the phone thing, but he also has a fixation on drones and sort of like what's going on above us with technology, and there's a lot of like what I thought were really kind of nice, not nice in the sense of like good, but well written descriptions of sort of like the drones and the planes and everything sort of going overhead, and that constant feeling of being like surveilled and also just like enmeshed in a net.
Yeah.
From these
which
other
does
sorts.
make
so
me
I,
think
so I,
that
I guess I only mean to push back in the sense that I don't think the book is like entirely like techno utopian in any sort of way, like with respect to phones or whatever.
Yeah.
I was going to say that in a way that his descriptions of the drones and like the fear aspect that they give everyone is a little bit of a pushback to his time as a Kingsman. Right? Criticism.
I love that description. Can we just start calling anyone that's worked for McKinsey a Kingsman?
A Kingsman? Right, and the meaning of something like a drone is a very different significance if you're sort of vaguely talking about the Middle East.
Right. Right, I mean, because they are both there to collect information the same way they do everywhere, but there's also always the perpetual threat of an actual military strike, like with the fucking bomb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Matt, would you say that in the interviews, was it like was he trying to like get across the immediacy of phone usage in his storytelling? Was that the point? Like,
I don't know what the immediacy, just that it was space erasing. I think that was like the big emphasis. Like when they look at it, they're there getting their news and like discussing each other, things with each other and being connected, and just the sort of phenomenological shit of like it creating this sense that there actually is no barriers between us or something like that. Just for the phone specifically, to like move that idea forward. And it's complicated with other technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he, in the interview, he explicitly was like, and now we have these new black rectangles that actually erase space, and like the doors, and then he connected the two.
It does remind me of that scene where Nadia like sees herself on her phone in a news
that was a great
picture.
scene.
That was one of my favorite scenes, yeah. And she describes it as being like she's not sure if she's looking at herself from it felt like she was looking at herself from the past, or possibly looking at herself from the future. And she said that
it's very Cosmopolis, huh?
It kind of is.
Yeah.
I actually have that that section highlighted if you want me to read it.
I want you to read us a little bit.
All right.
What would Cosmopolis be called if it was based in England?
Cosmopolis.
Yeah, you just have to say it like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So this is on page 157 to 158. A thriving trade in electricity was underway in dark London, run by those who lived in pockets with power. And Sayed and Nadia were able to recharge their phone from time to time, and if they walked at the edges of their locality, they could pick up a strong signal. And so, like many others, they caught up with the world in this way. And once, as Nadia sat on the steps of a building reading the news on her phone across the street from a detachment of troops and a tank, she thought she saw online a photograph of herself sitting on the steps of a building reading the news on her phone across the street from a detachment of troops and a tank. I love the repetition there. And she was startled and wondered how this could be, how she could both read this news and be this news, and how the newspaper could have published this image of her instantaneously, and she looked about for a photographer, and she had the bizarre feeling of time bending all around her, as though she was from the past reading about the future, or from the future reading about the past, and she almost felt that if she got up and walked home at this moment, there would be two Nadias, that she would split into two Nadias, and one would stay on the steps reading, and one would walk home, and two different lives would unfold for these two different selves, and she thought she was losing her balance, or possibly her mind, and then she zoomed in on the image and saw that the woman in the black robe reading the news on her phone was actually not her at all. And that was a great scene. And also interesting because that's not how most of this book is written at all. That was all one sentence. Sort of a departure in style from a lot of the rest of the book, which is very sort of clear and sort of concise sentences. And so I thought that was sort of effective there in sort of kind of conveying the mental experience of that.
But I think a lot like the magical realism and the Doors in general, like I actually wanted more of that type of writing. I wanted more just like maybe jolts of, I don't even know, just like a difference to the writing maybe and a difference to the storytelling. Maybe like try to capture more of the more of just something like untraceable, like the Doors are in the writing style, maybe, because that's what that passage did for me. It brought in the sense of weirdness that I felt like I was supposed to feel from the Doors that I wasn't really feeling.
There is an interesting juxtaposition, I think, Paul, between the style and yeah, maybe that's part of my issue with the Doors as a literary device too, is that it's all very weird and it would produce very weird experiences, but the writing is so straightforward, generally speaking.
I mean, the writing's like a warm blanket in general.
Yeah, I mean,
say.
yeah,
It is.
Yeah, 100%. Like the dude knows how to bring you in and wrap you in a warm blanket.
Yeah, even from the very beginning, like the first, I think maybe the whole chapter is about Said's parents and their relationship.
His
it kind of goes through the
insatiable
whole
mother.
Yeah, and like their sexual, and like how they met, and like there's how they have sex, and how they like kind of went through waves of having sex, and I don't know. It felt very personal and warm, and right off the bat, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like this book solely from the writing style standpoint, but that isn't everything, and I think, yeah, like what we're talking about is just like correct. Like it needed something more than just that, the style that's like kind of throughout the whole thing. It needed jolts and jabs.
Someone pointed out, some other people pointed out this, but in that opening part, why was there such an emphasis on like how the parents were fucking? Do you think?
I thought that related
that's a good
to
question.
us thinking about Said and Nadia. I thought it was more just about like generationally thinking about different peoples, or I don't know.
Well, it's.
I mean, in terms of like the actual fucking, I don't know.
It's an interesting contrast because, of course, like sexuality is a big kind of component of Said and Nadia's relationship, but they never actually have sex, right?
But do they?
Well,
At the end,
a couple times.
oh, I guess at the end they do. Yeah. But
Yeah.
throughout, it's a sort of point of both excitement and tension for both of them. And maybe it was kind of introduced as kind of a counterpoint to the way that they interact throughout the rest of the book. I'm not sure.
Or maybe to just like right off the bat normalize Middle Eastern people for Western readers.
Yeah.
And be like,
That's
oh,
my-
this is how my parents
Yeah.
could have fucked too, and this is how they did fuck.
Yeah.
I
She
saw
likes
that.
getting. Okay, so she. Oh, they like getting hit from behind as well. Okay.
Yeah.
They're just like us.
They're just like
Yeah.
us. Wow.
Wow,
Imagine
humans are generally the same.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. It's really working on me now. I realize.
Well, I mean, one of the other points that I wanted to bring up to bring it back a little bit to the phone thing before I forget and before we maybe move on too far, is that one of the things, and this does relate, I think, to Said's family, is that in a lot of ways, the door, and I wonder if this belies Hamid's own understanding of the direct kind of relationship between phones and these doors, is that Said, after going through the door, his character arc over the course of the book actually kind of brings him closer to his particular place of origin. He becomes more religiously devout. He prays more often. He kind of longs for his, as we find out in the book, dead family. His mother dies violently before they leave, but his father dies much later. And I don't know if he ever actually finds that out concretely, but it is told to us, the reader, in the book.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pneumonia.
Yes. And he sort of goes through this portal to the world that erases distance or whatever, but it actually fortifies his feelings of, placidness, I suppose. And he kind of sort of moves continually closer to where he came from. Nadia has a bit of a different experience. I wouldn't say necessarily an opposite one, but a different one. And so I think that's like, I don't know if that undercuts the point about the sort of erasure of space and time or whatever, but Said has a very different kind of experience after going through the door, and it brings him closer to his home, closer to his country, closer to his family. It almost constricts, not in a bad way necessarily, but it sort of brings him closer to those things.
Yeah, I think they just sort of represent loosely the two broad tracks you could take, right? Either feeling less inclined to be back in your place of origin, or to be more strongly identified with it.
Right.
Or it's a little bit of like, no matter where you go, you're there still, or what's that phrase?
There you are.
Wherever you are.
There you are.
Yeah. Whatever it is.
But I think that fits well. I mean, Said had a more connection to his family life than Nadia did. Nadia, like from the get-go, was like, I'm Nadia. I'm doing my own shit. I rule. I'm riding a fucking motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
And Said always had those inklings towards family life. And I don't know, it kind of makes sense to me on a personal level that no matter where he went in the world, or where they went in the world, those ideals were still with him. So they would have been with him if he stayed in their home country the whole time, anyway. Which I think is very human. A character, which I think is also one of the points that Hamid was going for.
Yeah, he really tries to like get every fucking perspective in the way he can, like expressing its potential best version of itself a little bit. Aside from maybe like the militants and stuff, but like, you got like, I think, despite my suspicion that Hamid has like a somewhat naive attitude towards what the future may hold for people,
which we should definitely talk more about.
Like this book, at least to me, adequately, so that I wasn't just like blech, was like making a complicated case. It felt that like, that felt real. So you have like Nadia and Said, and then you get all the like. I liked that part where the old lady was like, noted, like she lived in Marin County or whatever, Marin County, and she was like, it was just kind of her perspective. So you get the fucking like the frightened old white lady, the most dangerous type of person, and then so I think he's really like making the effort to encapsulate a lot of the experiences and like demonstrate that it's both not easy, because even there's like some good things about the fucking sort of refugee encampment in that like mansion, but then he doesn't emphasize violence or how it could be bad, but he doesn't not say it, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think that I don't know, like I do like honestly overall the point of view he took of just like trying to write about a couple going through a very relatable like young love. I think that's like a really like that's probably the biggest strength of the whole book for me, honestly, is their relationship and the writing about the fallout of like loving somebody. I thought was so subtle and so good, and just so relatable. Just like nothing seemed to like happen really. Like there weren't big events in their
Which is
lives.
such I think that's such an interesting like point, Paul, because so much does
teleported.
happen.
So much does happen
but
around.
I think you're right.
Yeah, but yeah, in terms of just like the one-on-one relationship they had with each other, it was just like nothing seemed to happen. But one day will go by and they'll react differently to each other in a weird way they don't totally understand. And I've gone through breakups, and that's like how it happens, and the writing was just so fucking good to me. And
They're
like,
my favorite parts
just
too.
like the demise of two people's love, but then like it's like the ending's a warm blanket too, though, because
Spoiler alert, they break up.
They break up, but at the end they meet when they're like 70 years old, and they have a nice like rekindling, and I don't know. It was nice.
And Harry Potter marries Winnie. Yeah.
Matt.
Spoilers, dude.
I'm sorry.
I have just two things.
It's not Winnie.
Or who is it?
Ginny.
Whatever.
Have you even read Harry
Jesus,
Potter?
dude, you're banned from the Harry Potter segment this episode.
Fuck. No, please don't.
But I wanted to just touch a little bit, Matt, on your point about kind of the different reactions that we see from people to this kind of new world and all of these new developments, because you talked about the old white woman in California. One of my other favorite segments was one of these vignettes that he tells about the housemaid in Morocco, in Marrakesh, right, where she is has been working for this like rich family in the city or whatever, and her younger daughter is trying to get her to go with her through one of these doors, right? And she kind of feels this sense of just like I'm here, like this is me, this place is my identity, this is my life, and it just wouldn't even make sense for me to leave. And I'll just read a little bit of that section. This is towards the end of it. The maid looked at her daughter, who looked to her as though she had captured the best of her and her husband too, for she could see him in her, and of her mother, whose voice came from her daughter's mouth, strong and low, but not her words, for her daughter's words were utterly unlike her mother's had been. They were quick and nimble and new. The maid placed her hand on her daughter's hand and brought it to her lips and kissed it, the skin of her lips clinging for an instant to the skin of her child, clinging even as she lowered her daughter's hand, the shape of lips being mutable in this way, and the maid smiled and shook her head. One day she might go, she thought, but not today. And I felt like that again, like you said, we get a lot of kind of kaleidoscopic perspectives on these events, right? And then like there's another vignette that's told about like an old guy who basically sees someone come through a door in his shed and like just walk across his lawn, and they wind up like falling in love and having this relationship. It's told in sketches, right? Like these are all very short 2-3 page vignettes, but
and even that old lady, right? She, like there's a lot of like, so you got the space and time thing again, like there's a lot of intergenerational like relationships happening, because the older woman, her kids are gone, but she has a grandchild, but the grandchild is like mixed race and like partially Chinese,
right?
But she's also the only one who will like I don't know. The old lady's
and
clearly supposed to be written
similarly-
as like racist a little bit, but
Yeah.
so she's like, okay, it was like I love this girl, but she's a little Chinese looking, and then but just like kind of not knowing what to do with that. But the end of that chunk is what's the pithy phrase that I know Hamid was proud to write? We are all. What is it?
We're
all
all
refugees
migrants
through
through time. Yeah.
Migrants through time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was I think that's supposed to be taken as a very heavy sort of hint at one of the big ass themes.
Well, and of course, earlier on in the book, Sayed and Nadia try really hard to get Sayed's father to come with them through the door, right?
Yeah.
And he won't leave. And I thought that description was also really well done because his wife was killed by basically, I think, a stray bullet through a window, right?
Yeah.
Or she was in her car, like getting something out of her car, and was sort of shot and dies violently. And I thought that description was pretty gruesome.
Got the top of
and
her
well
head
done.
taken off.
Yeah.
Like Coyotito style.
Yeah. F in the chat for Coyotito and for Said's mom. And his dad.
Stupid.
Not quite as
Stupid
violent.
baby. I don't give a shit about the pearl and that stupid fucking baby.
Damn.
Yeah, damn. That's fucking hard.
Wow.
On the record.
That's fucking hard.
Brutal.
Yeah, I mean, I'll actually go on the record saying that the pearl should have been called the bad pearl.
I mean, it was bad. It hurt them
Yeah.
badly.
He should have loaded the gun with the pearl and shot Coyotito accidentally with it.
One
Now we're
pearl
cooking
bill.
with
Whoa,
gas.
now we're
Yeah.
fucking with
Yeah.
gas.
Okay.
But I think in that section where they're trying to get Said's father to go with him, Said says to him at one point like mom's gone, like she's dead, and his dad just goes like she's not for me, and
Right.
he just can't leave, and he ultimately winds up he kind of stays knowing he's gonna die somehow. Ultimately he doesn't die in the violence, he just dies by other means, but
Chad.
yeah, there's a ton of generational complexity, I think, here too, and I think Matt, that line sums it up in terms of Hamid's view on it.
I just have another little chunk here that I highlighted just because I think it's another big one. It's on 138, middle paragraph, if you want to read along.
I do.
Sayed and Nadia knew what the build-up to conflict felt like, and so the feeling that hung over London in those days was not new to them, and they faced it not with bravery exactly, and not with panic either. Not mostly, but instead with a resignation shot through with moments of tension, with tension ebbing and flowing, and when the tension receded there was calm. The calm that is called the calm before the storm, but is in reality the foundation of human life, waiting there for us between the steps of our march to our mortality, when we are compelled to pause and not act but be. So, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
just a weird,
That was
almost like
great.
little existentialist chunk there of like,
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot
existing
of
with your
little moments-
awareness. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry that I kept interjecting. I like I really like the thread of the relationship mixed with like these moments of extreme fear and just like close calls. Like, there's
Violence, dude.
just horrible violence. But yeah, interjecting like little moments like the paragraph you just read, Matt, like there's always this like overbearing dread and impending doom that's coming to these characters. And it makes me think of the scene where they're on the beach too and they're like fishing and it's getting like
Yeah.
dark and then they get followed by like four dudes and they go and they're like kind of not running away but like walking quickly. They end up dropping their pole and then they camp out in front of a guarded house.
Yeah.
But
they know
I mean,
the
these-
the police can see them, I think.
But yeah, it's just like for many of us, like us three white guys, it's like an unrelatable life to us that I just thought was very compelling and understandable, or I could understand the situation, but it's not relatable to us at all. and I thought that Hamid did just like a great job of what I think he was trying to do is just like give a general gist of the reality of so many people that Westerners kind of just lump into one category and don't give two thoughts about. So in that way, I think like this book was very strong.
And I think that was certainly intentional too, right? And this gets back a little bit to the question of specificity and how specific should he have been, and so on and so forth. But like, inserting what I think we've all already said is some of our favorite sort of from a writing perspective parts of the book, where he's talking about their relationship, which we all intuitively recognize, right? A relationship that just kind of slowly morphs over time and becomes something unrecognizable from what it started out as. But having that kernel exist within the context of something that is deeply unrelatable to most Western readers, I think was done really well, as you said, Paul.
And that's why I'm kind of thinking about this book as like political pop music. Like I can rate pop music very, very high. Like I fucking love a lot of pop music. 5 bags for a lot of pop music. And this book to me is like very much attempting to be popular. And I can't like discount it because of that. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I think that maybe it was like trying to reach for general audiences in a lot of ways and be very generalized. But I think it did it very successfully. Like I actually was thinking about the Pearl a lot. Like we read the Pearl, or I didn't read the Pearl, but you guys read the Pearl in middle school, and that was like a good age to read that book. And I think that this book is like probably really good for certain people of a certain age to read.
I 100% agree. Yeah,
Like it's not like an
throw it in the
elevated
middle school
like
area.
yeah, maybe like high school.
Yeah,
Yeah. So when I think about it like that, it changes my potential rating, I would say, and evaluation.
yeah. It's like Hamid is so good at writing what you said, like this kind of what this incredibly massive topic, which I mean, literally in the narrative of the book, like spans the globe. Like he's talking about the human race, right? Like grandly,
Yeah, the human race.
right? Which that's too big. Like you can't just start talking about the human race, right? It's just like, all right. So you do have to do these particulars, and I mean, yeah. So he flits through all these perspectives, and I think in a sort of broad sense, he succeeds in doing one of the main sort of claimed benefits of fiction, right? Which is like creating empathy, or like at least for him, committing an act of empathy in his art, right? And yeah, I think that the way it's written, it would be. I was thinking the same thing, like decent reading material for like middle school or high school, actually, as like an intro to this kind of just very notion, and that
Yeah.
made me more sympathetic to it than I would have been normally, a little bit.
Yeah, like in terms of other like refugee or fallout of refugee type books we've read, I was thinking of like the Museum of Unconditional Surrender a little bit.
Yeah,
And I would
definitely.
say that, I mean that's one of my favorite books we've read. And I mean I would say that that's like a better book overall, but maybe not accessible. Like this book is very accessible,
So
and I think
particular.
intentionally so.
Yeah,
And yeah, exactly. I think Matt, go ahead.
just that Ugresic is like, that's so her. That's her incredibly specific means of expressing her very specific experience with it.
Right.
It's really not this. It's not Exit West.
Yeah, and
No.
like as we've talked about, like in the sense of like in the context of like difficulty of books, like that book requires a shit ton of historical research and background on like the relationship of Yugoslavia to the Soviet Union and the sort of modern history of Yugoslavia to even get a handle on what she's trying to talk about a lot of the time. But although, of course, in that book there are like deeply human moments, like with her and her mother, and so on and so forth. But a lot of the context and the references and all of the sort of the particularities of culture and place are really central to that book. And I think you're right that that's not the case here.
Do you think that this book ends satisfyingly? Do you like that little tag and just sort of the did is there an apocalypse kind of quietly happening on the earth though? Like at this point, I'm assuming the assumption I had was that there were like a bajillion doors,
Right.
and everyone was fucking everywhere. And initially they claim all of these like very significantly like classic places where a lot of these refugee crises have happened over the recent history. So like Mykonos is famously like a place where refugees go.
Yeah.
London, obviously, a lot of tension there. I guess California, places like Paris and stuff too. So at first that's where he wants the specificity, but then eventually, right? It's like, did you get the sense that like people were just all over the fucking place? Did whole countries just get vacated because it sucked that bad, and there were places where no one was there anymore? Like, what was the world looking like in your imagination with these doors?
I mean, this is my Star Trek: The Next Generation viewpoint, but like,
Hell yeah.
I loved it. I mean, I kind of like the idea of just like people thinking. Like, I loved the segments where he was talking about England or Britain just having like fertile land and just being like a place that people will survive because it has like fertile soil. And I don't know, I maybe like it's like the extreme leftist in me that was just kind of like, that's nice and quaint. Like, we are kind of all migrants, and my people migrated from Poland and Italy in 1912 or whatever. I don't know. I like that, and I didn't see it as like a doomy future that Hamid was trying to portray. I saw it more of as like a, not utopian, but like more of a realistic approach to how things could progress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit's just mixed up now more.
Yeah.
There's no way to stop it.
Yeah, and I don't know if he was critiquing that or just like saying that's I didn't know if he was saying that was the way to go or not, really. Or if he was just saying that this is the way it is going.
That's where I got confused. No, I'm just confused because like I at least from what I was hearing from his own account, like in these like talks, like he's like borders and I'm Pakistani, but that's not a real thing. He's very much like of that mind. Like, these are fake. This is all fake. Like, he's like, borders are fake. Fucking, I think reality isn't real most of the time. So he's all about the false distinction.
Well, I don't know if we should conflate those two things, but yeah.
What?
Well, that borders are fake and reality isn't real.
Well, fair enough. But I mean, like,
the reality of borders,
like,
maybe.
Yeah, like that's what I mean. Is like, as things stand now, a lot of it's kind of bullshit and made up a bit, and it's to our detriment as like human beings. And like, he was talking about how like he wants his vision, his utopian vision a bit is for people is like a full global society. Like, he was like, that's the only way he thinks we could survive, and that's the only kind of way to avoid all the other shit that we put the earth and ourselves through and all that kind of stuff. So he's very much like global society.
I think that's my view too, like kind of shit libby, but I also fall into like the Zizek mindset of like anyone can be my neighbor, but don't talk to me. which I love about Zizek.
Yeah, right. That's a great line of his.
I love that so much. It's just like, accept your neighbor, don't love your neighbor, just like accept him and don't talk to him.
Yeah.
And don't talk to me, but like you're fine. I love that.
And I do think this book ends on that kind of ambiguous note, and then there's a little sweet touch of like just nostalgia, just for a cherry on top with them meeting.
I actually,
The
I think that
pleaser.
it fits within the pop music metaphor, but I did not like the cherry on top of them like meeting again.
I don't think it was necessary.
It wasn't necessary, and I thought it was more poetic for them to just be like, we didn't talk for a week, then a month, then a year, then a lifetime.
Yeah.
I thought that was fucking awesome.
Yeah, just leave it.
Just leave it.
It's a great last line, yeah.
But it wasn't the last line, so.
Yep.
No.
Points off.
I do just want to read a section, Matt, just because you mentioned this like question of kind of like the because he does use the language of the apocalypse at least once, and this is way towards the end on 217, and I wonder if this doesn't like cut against a little bit the kind of pure utopianism that he may be expressing in some of these interviews.
For the record, I don't think this book does it.
No, yeah.
But I think that's like floating above everything.
Right.
You know.
Right. So this it says the locality around Marin seemed to be rousing itself from a profound and collective low in those days. It has been said that depression is a failure to imagine a plausible, desirable future for oneself, and not just in Marin, but in the whole region, in the Bay Area, and in many other places too, places both near and far. The apocalypse appeared to have arrived, and yet it was not apocalyptic, which is to say that while the changes were jarring, they were not the end, and life went on, and people found things to do, and ways to be, and people to be with, and plausible, desirable futures began to emerge, unimaginable previously, but not unimaginable now, and the result was something not unlike relief. And so I think that kind of speaks to what you were raising in the sense that it's, maybe a commentary not necessarily on the inherent desirability of this kind of like global, mixing pot future or whatever, but more a comment, and maybe this is a separate discussion that we need to have on the sort of ability of human beings to just fucking make it work and like find the small good things in whatever context, even if it is apocalyptic in a sense. And maybe this story is kind of a case in point of that, right? Where Sayed and Nadia find a way to make things work, at least for a time, in a kind of apocalyptic bubble, right? Where their city was. Right. And sort of, so like maybe it's a sort of, to read it in a less optimistic, but still having some faith in a sort of dark faith in humanity kind of way. It almost reminds me of a sort of like, Beckett style point of just like human beings can fucking get used to whatever, right? Like I can't go on, I'll go on type move. I don't think Hamid is like that dark, but I think it's, probably somewhere in between a sort of like open techno-utopianism, at least this book. Again, maybe the dude himself is a full-on techno-utopian whatever, but at least in this text, I think it probably falls somewhere in between those extremes.
And I think he's just running a thought experiment too, like with the issue of the day, right? Like it had to have loomed large in the minds of people in 2017 in particular, like, and just being like, what if this situation arose in which there was no way to even police or fucking deal? Like,
right.
There were like a billion doors that could take you anywhere, and it was just completely, you were no longer, it was no longer an option for you to even like police a border or like maintain the concept of people not being able to get into your
right
into your bounded space of land that you call your country or whatever.
And I think that's, I thought it was interesting, and I kind of wondered what you all thought about the portrayal of what ultimately winds up going down in London and England in general, right? Which is sort of on a grander scale what he talks about at the end there, which is just like, people figure it out, because eventually, right at first, it's this crisis moment, and they try to cordon off all the sections where they think doors are, and they have police patrols, and they cut off power to try to get people to leave, and so on and so forth, right? But ultimately, the British government in this book kind of just goes, all right, fuck it, like, we just got to figure it out, and they just kind of expand London outward, and they put the people, they say, okay, you can live here, but you have to kind of like work for the government basically, and like build your own homes, and help us build the infrastructure to sustain you, and so on and so forth. So it does kind of just become this like, all right, fuck it, we'll figure it out kind of moment.
Well, it becomes like an organic socialism moment too, right? It's like
in a way,
like the government, the city government of London is just like, okay, how do we deal with these people? Let's help them build our infrastructure. To me, that's like very socialistic.
And you know, I will just say, you know, on the question of kind of like realism, or how this would actually play out, to your earlier question, Matt, like as someone personally that has great sympathy with the like borders are fake mentality.
Say that to the wall in Texas.
Yeah, I know.
It'll beat you up.
Yeah.
Just say it to the actual brick wall too.
Right. Yeah, you know, nations are fake, borders are fake. Shout out Keith Woods.
Oceans are fake.
just kidding. Not shout out. Shout. That is.
Down.
Yeah, shout down.
Shout in.
Shout in. Whisper in. You know, I do kind of have the intuition that, like, more or less, if we all just kind of, as a world, decided borders are fake, fuck it, we'd figure it out, more or less.
Well, yeah, I agree, actually. Yeah. Maybe it's like a naive leftist point of view, but I think that, yeah. To use a right-wing analogy, it's like the free market, but it's free migration.
Ooh, that's spicy. Well, yeah, I mean, it's actually not spicy, because most libertarians are in favor of open borders.
Yeah, it's not that I don't believe that we couldn't cope with a lot of things, you know. So I'm actually with you in the sense of, like, I have optimism that we can deal with a lot of stuff, but that includes potentially incredibly violent ruptures and cataclysms.
Right.
Of which this could be one, potentially, just to, if we're gonna have to overcome generations of this kind of like bias and forethought, you know.
And which in a weird way, I think Hamid downplays. You know, I definitely think he downplays the degree to which this sort of situation would be like horrendously violent and bloody. Like, you know,
you don't get the full-on pogrom or something that I was kind of expecting a little
bit. like essentially when they're all in London, like, you know, there's like a threat or two of like a nativist kind of nationalist like violent riot or something, and
you got your BNP guys basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I think some of that goes down, and maybe a couple people die or something, but it's not to the scale that I think it almost certainly would be in reality. Like essentially the worst thing that happens is they get their power shut off.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that is probably too sanguine in terms of the way it would actually go down.
Yeah, but yeah. Sorry, I have kind of a thought in my head about that, but like I think it does relate to like the personal experience for maybe a lot of people like Nadia and Said too, is that like and I think that it takes away from it narratively as a whole, but I think it encompasses the characterization of the two main characters really well, is that like a lot of people in these situations and in these countries, they're surrounded by danger that comes so close to them, probably like throughout many moments in their lives, but they do walk away unscathed. And so yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say other than that, like, I think it added to their characterization, but took away.
So you think it's almost like a way of kind of encapsulate, like the real danger is actually there, and but it's much more than they perceive it to be because they are used to living in danger. Is that kind of the suggestion?
Yeah, I think that like they've been witnessed to a lot of people that have like like there was a scene of like I think Sade finds a decapitated head, or walks by a head that's been decapitated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think his father sees kids playing soccer with a decapitated head at one point.
That's it. Yeah.
It's making me think of some famous quote by some famous writer that I
Football.
can't think of. That's just like I worried about things my whole life and nothing ever happened to me. You know what I'm talking about? I can't think of the exact quote.
I get that sentiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out Anxiety Gang.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. Yet again, I think that what I'm just going to reiterate what I said is just like that added to the realism of the actual characters, but it took away from the narrative theme potentially.
It still kind of basically was grounded with them, so maybe they like danced between the raindrops a little bit in terms of getting tagged with seeing something really horrendous, but
Yeah.
and that might be the excuse potentially to avoid bringing up things like that, because again, ultimately, I think this book is like trying to be very warm and humanist, and like maybe there was just I feel like Hamid probably thought quite a lot about the type of violence and how much in ratio to other things to put in.
Definitely.
And like, the wholesale slaughter on race bases or something was probably, he probably was just like, he probably thought about it. I can almost, I'm willing to believe, but was just like, I don't know. Like, why would I just show like, why would I have a race war going on? Like, I don't know. Maybe it's not useful to the overall project that this book represents.
Right, and I think that it's like I don't think that it's like totally jarring narratively, because he has as you say, Matt, like a very carefully measured amount of violence done on the part of the militants early on in the book, and a similarly carefully measured amount of violence done by the reactionaries in the West in the back half.
Mm-hmm. And then by the very end, when they're in Marin, they're kind of just chilling. Things have like solidified into, at the very least, like recognizable, work camps and just sort of like encampments on the outskirts of like these major cities.
And they're just kind of jobs and
yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you guys felt about that overall, but like, what did you think about the dichotomy and maybe the juxtaposition that I felt between the two characters and the overall story going on, like politically and socially and all that? Because I mean, that's one of my major issues, is that I felt like the three aspects of the book, the love story, the political issues, and the magical realism, they did not weave together at all for me, really.
Oh, I mean, as I've said already, I think that the love story kind of like nested within the political story. That worked pretty well for me. I've already expressed my narrative problems with the usage of the doors. I kind of wanted more of them, and I wanted them to be integrated more than they were. So I agree with you on the question of the magical realism aspect of the doors. I thought that the love story and the kind of broader picture political stuff worked pretty well, but yeah, the doors were the sticking point for me.
Yeah, I'm pretty much similarly like, probably all three blending. There was just some omissions and pacing issues and stuff that like undercut the literal content of what I thought Hamid was trying to say. But the strongest aspect to me was just straight up the really basic but beautifully sort of rendered love story. I was just like, yeah. I mean, the beginning was probably my favorite, to be honest. Like, just them, and again, almost COVID vibes, but with the militants. Like,
yeah, true.
The infrastructure around them slowly like deteriorating and turning down, and them finding all these like weird workarounds to go through their like bombed out city, and they just
like
hear the kind of like
Nadia drops down the covering for him to put on in order to be able to enter her building and walk up to her room.
yeah, and they're in like gasoline lines, and they're trying to charge their phones, and food becomes scarce, and meanwhile they're trying to like they're like horny for each other and like trying to text, and then text blacks out, and they meet at like a shitty burger, and then the burger joint is exploded one day, and they're like, all right, and they never took each other's numbers down. Just like all of that, like within the, again, a somewhat charming and just sort of banal almost love story happening in this context was super effective to me in terms of like humanizing people in that scenario.
I think it carries through. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think I was just gonna say, to answer my own question, I think that like I would have preferred the Doors just not being a component in the overall story, because I think that like the weaving together works a lot of ways between the social and political and whatever and the relationship, but I think the Doors, like the magical realism, just really throws me off for real.
I want to come back to the Doors in a second, because I have a political point to make about the Doors. But just on this question about the love story, I also think it like carries through to me to the end, where it starts to break down. Like that, I mean, I love the beginning, but I like in terms of the realism and relatability of it, kind of like what Paul was saying earlier, like that felt equally real. Like the breakdown of the relationship, where they kind of start fucking like drifting, and there's some of my favorite passages in the book are from the end when they're talking about that, and
yeah, mine too.
I have a couple that I can read, if that's okay.
I'm glad they both couple off too. Thank God.
Yes.
Usually someone's alone and didn't want it to happen.
Yes. No. Yeah. But I thought that was described so like it was very organic, right? Like Nadia falls in love with basically a female cook at the kind of like meal providing organization that she works with, and then Saeed starts going to this kind of like Southern black kind of like revivalist church, right? And falls in love with the preacher's daughter. I thought that was like just really well done, and
they kept like they like didn't end up hating each other or just like wanting to not talk to each other. Like it kind of happened like slowly and organically.
Yeah. There were two paragraphs that really kind of like I just thought were beautiful in that description of kind of like that slow decay, but in a way that's like not like super depressing, like I think we all kind of know. So this is I think before they go to California. This is when they're still in London, I think. 188 to 189. Thank you, Paul.
It's time for love. Let's talk about it.
And so when she suggested one day, out of the blue, under the drone-crossed sky and in the invisible network of surveillance that radiated out from their phones, recording and capturing and logging everything, that they abandon this place and give up their position on the housing list and all they had built here and pass through a nearby door she had heard of to the new city of Marin on the Pacific Ocean close to San Francisco, he did not argue or even resist as she thought he might, and instead he said yes. And both of them were filled with hope that they would be able to rekindle their relationship, to reconnect with their relationship as it had been not long ago, and to elude, through a distance spanning a third of the globe, what it seemed in danger of becoming. And I think that is, like, obviously it's, like, taken to an extreme in this scenario, but we've all done shit like that, right? Let's just do something extreme and kind of, like, crazy to try to, salvage a relationship that's not headed in the right direction, right?
Right.
Whether that's like moving or fucking having a threesome or what, whatever, like whatever the fuck it is, right? Like we all know that vibe. And then I just want to read the second one before you respond, Paul.
Having a dog lick peanut butter off of you.
Yeah, exactly. Or getting a dog, or frankly having kids, right? Like
right.
All of this shit. Taking these kind of extreme sort of measures to try to kind of rekindle or salvage or whatever. And then the next one that I thought was just a really beautiful moment that kind of elucidates or highlights their respective character arcs. This is on 205. One night, one of the tiny drones, this is when they're already in California, One night, one of the tiny drones that kept a watch on their district, part of a swarm and not larger than a hummingbird, crashed into the transparent plastic flap that served as both door and window of their shanty. And Said gathered its motionless, iridescent body and showed it to Nadia, and she smiled and said they ought to give it a burial. And they dug a small hole right there in the hilly soil where it had fallen using a spade, and then covered this grave again, pressed it flat, and Nadia asked if Said was planning on offering a prayer for the departed automaton, and he laughed and said maybe he would. And I think that that's just like a good moment of, suggesting, she's kind of poking fun at him in terms of this like extra religious turn he's taken since leaving, and he kind of knows she's poking fun of him, but also it's real, and that's just kind of like a little one of those moments that you mentioned earlier, Paul, where they just are relating. They're connecting, but it's about something that is symptomatic of a greater disjoint that exists in their relationship.
Yeah.
And they've traversed space to such massive degrees, but the more operative thing on them and everybody is time, right? So like no matter how much technical geographical distance they've moved across the globe, like they were always going to move apart through time emotionally, and there was no real stopping that. So I'm also with you. Like I think the full arc of the start and dissolution was the best part, and definitely the right move as like the backbone for trying to tell a story like this. I liked it.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the political point I wanted to make about the Doors.
Wait, before you say that, it's like this song reminds me of that song by Michael Jackson, the Free Willy song, a little bit. Just like a strong riff, but it's talking about like social issues like animal rights.
Is the Free Willy? Okay,
Willy.
okay.
It's not called Free Willy. I forget what it's called, like River Jordan or something.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of that song a lot. Just a strong riff throughout. That's Nadia and Said.
Michael Jackson would like this book.
Definitely not.
I don't know.
Michael
about
Jackson
that, dude.
would not listen to any podcast if he was still alive.
Dude, this podcast, Michael Jackson's canceled.
He is
like
canceled.
This book. Doesn't mean you can't like it too.
That's right. If there's any Michael Jackson podcasts out there.
Oh yeah, there are.
I know, I'm sure.
There are.
All right, so here's the point that I wanted to make. So I said I had two problems with the Doors: the narrative tension and the political tension. And this is the political tension. I think, like, as you said earlier, Matt, in your discussion about this, he's taking a risk here, right? Because for a lot of people, both refugees and in sort of the popular consciousness of refugees, the journey, obviously there's a context and a background, but the getting from place to place is a huge part of that story, right? And so cutting that out, I think, is certainly bold and interesting, but it comes with risks, right? And I think one of the risks that worries me is one that kind of cuts against the overall thrust of the book, right? Which is to try to humanize and make kind of relatable some of these characters. But one of the most dehumanizing things that we tend to do in the West when thinking about the figure of like the refugee, capital T, capital R, is make this sort of implicit assumption or view them as like they just kind of show up at our border magically, kind of out of nowhere, right? And there's no history and there's no context, and they're just here, and well, I don't want them here, so they can just go back to wherever they came from, with the assumption being that that's a simple process, right? And it isn't. And I wonder if the sort of like, device of the door kind of plays into that or invites that false understanding of the process of being a refugee, right? Where, you look at someone who's come to the southern border from, Nicaragua or wherever, and the idea is like, oh, they've just shown up here essentially through magic, which is literally what happens in this book. And I think that's a very harmful view. And
well, I mean,
I wonder about how to navigate that.
Well, we were kind of talking about this earlier. Is that like if you center on that like travel aspect only in a story, you might gravitate towards that being the identity of that individual solely because that's what you think of a refugee. You think of like oh I'm thinking of a Mexican. What does that mean? Oh, they're trying to get over the wall. Like I'm not saying I think that, but like many people
Yeah,
might
yeah.
think that just like oh they're trying to like cross the fucking Gulf of Mexico on a boat. And I think that's harmful, and I think that's what Hamid was actually trying to avoid. But I do understand what you're trying to say is that like it kind of backfires on him a bit because like as Westerners, that's how we see a refugee as they just pop up.
Yeah.
It's sort of like there's a risk of reduction either way, right? Do you reduce the refugee experience to only the sort of space in between where they are from and where they are attempting to get to, right? Which I think is a temptation. And I think to go back to the Museum of Unconditional Surrender, Ugresich really captures that feeling subjectively really well of being like displaced, like literally without place and perpetually sort of in between.
Which Hamid doesn't really do.
Doesn't address really very much at all.
Yeah.
I would argue.
And I think when you're if you're going to remove the travel aspect from your narrative of refugees ostensibly, then the doors become the place where you need to make up for that with the strength of the concept. Like it feels like again, like I said, like a sort of philosophical thought experiment that is not fleshed out. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like not enough, especially if you're using it to exclude something as important to the understanding of the process of being a refugee as like traveling to the places and crossing borders and dealing with people.
Well, and that still comes back to my like I think maybe all of our thoughts of just like why the magical realism? Why not just like choose to diminish the storytelling to like and they escape to this place? And that actually I think would have hit a little bit harder. Is just like yeah, I'm not going to focus on the actual escaping. Just say that they escaped and they
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, what? How would this book have read if there was no magical element? And every time they go through a door, he just kind of says, a couple months later they were here, right? As the
Right.
description.
And they were just living in a refugee camp that happened to already be at a place.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right,
It really
right.
wouldn't change almost anything, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it, Paul.
but I think
I mean, it
to
would
your
change a
point, Gabe,
lot, but
it would change. I mean, to go to your point though, Gabe, is that like I think it would change a lot because like it devalues that whole experience. But I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Well, but I mean, of course, if it was written that way, we could make a similar sort of criticism, like, "Oh, wow, you're throwing off the experience of actually getting to the place with two sentences." Like, we could be having the same sort of conversation. It would just be
Yeah.
set in against a different context in narratively.
I just
So,
slightly
like, I
disagree
mean-
with Hamid's, idea about why he did it.
Yeah.
A bit. I'm just kind of just not in agreement with like the effectiveness of de-emphasizing that to the level of literally it's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, charitably, we might say something like, and I guess this kind of fits in with Hamid's general kind of socio-philosophical view, right? Which is that, like, if these doors exist, right, the sort of question of kind of refugee and migrants becomes an unavoidable one, right? It's inevitable. Like it's just
Yeah.
it just is a bare fact that is going to happen, and all of our kind of political maneuvering and policies and this and that are going to be, ultimately ineffectual against it. And maybe that was part of the point he was trying to make, that like this is just a bedrock fact of modern society, and we should in some ways stop thinking so much about it. Or hand wringing so much about it, maybe particularly. So I could see that maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's just forcing the issue with the device, the magical device.
Yeah.
To sort of describe, I think probably potentially something he sees as inevitable anyway, or he definitely desires for it to be that way.
Can I play a game right now?
Yes.
Because you guys don't like Murakami as much as me. Can you guys
What are you,
try
Jigsaw?
to explain? I'm Jigsaw.
You want to play a game?
I have pancreatic cancer.
Magical realism, Jigsaw.
And I want you to talk about magical realism.
Magical Murakami Jigsaw.
Can you guys try to explain why Murakami's magical realism works and this did not?
I'll go first.
I ain't read enough, man, but I'll try.
I mean, I've only really read Killing Commendatore and then the Men Without Women collection of short stories, which
are on our YouTube channel.
Which is on our YouTube
So
channel.
go
check
check
out that
out.
series that Paul and I did.
You can see our faces.
Yeah, which you want.
You handsome mugs.
And my nipples.
Is that true?
No.
Oh, damn.
I was
Sorry.
like, did you lift up your shirt at some point? But so I guess I can put off the short story collection, I think, mostly because there's not a lot of magical realism in those stories. There's one or two, but it's very, very light, like even lighter than this book, in most cases. Killing Commendatore, I can say a little bit about, and I think I said this mostly in that episode. I'm not actually convinced that it does work really well in that book.
That's true. This is backfiring on me.
So I don't really know that I need to offer that type of explanation because I didn't love the way it was done in that book either, and I think I said kind of the same thing, which is that I wanted more of it. I wanted to be committed to more.
Okay,
Yeah.
I would say fuck you to you, but you just need to read more Murakami.
Well, I think the only other thing I did was Wind Up Bird Chronicle, in which I think the magical realism works. Very similar things happening, or some definite like portal, like and this book too, right? Like portals, the thin membranes between worlds, etc. But with Murakami, right? It's like he's not. This is just such a like refugees and like these are just very like grounded and real issues, and he has way more of like an earnest, I would say, sort of like agenda and message to put across about that he thinks is laid bare by an issue like refugees, period, and then just putting like a fucking portal, or just like a cloak that makes you fly, or just something like that into the context of like that kind of thing is just
a magic carpet
more
ride.
fraught. It's just more fraught, dude. You can't just be like, we're gonna do Rwanda. I'm gonna talk about Rwanda or whatever. But one of the guys has a magic pen where whatever he writes it comes true. And you're just like, you're like, okay. There's people beheading him, but it's just like, yeah. So I think it's just.
I think that I asked that
subject
question
matter.
to try to gather my thoughts a bit about why, and I think that Murakami has. I think I talked about this in the Killing Commendatore thing. Is that like there's an element of spirituality and like Japanese spirituality that is throughout Murakami's writing too, that like fits well, I think. And I actually do think that it's a brave, cool, artistic choice for Hamid to try to implement that way of writing. I just don't think it worked. But I think it's like if he had that thought of just like, this would be a cool idea artistically, let me try to do it.
Dude,
I don't think he did it enough.
Again,
I think that's my general thing.
I was fucking fully hype on the concept when I read about it. I was like, this sounds cool and interesting to me, but it I don't know. It just felt very halfway and then add onto it all of the like worries that I have about it politically that Matt and I have sort of been articulating, or we've all been articulating in various ways. I just don't know that it was worth it to put it in there. And I think what you said earlier, like if you want to reduce that experience because you have other things you want to say, fine. Just do it in a way that just, do it in a sentence. Do it in, just say like they were here next.
Well, it felt. I mean, and that's why it kind of feels to me like a reduction towards a BuzzFeed article. Like, I'm not saying that was his, like, we can't know his initial artistic choice to, like, I want to implement magical realism into this novel, but it comes across like that to me, is that like this is a high, like it's like a good idea, and it wasn't followed through. So it makes me feel a little icky about the whole experience. But I don't know if that was the initial intent.
If you have magical Narnia doors in your book, but then I think we were right in saying with some very minor tweaks, you could remove the doors entirely, and it would require very little editing to do. I don't know if it just goes. We're just saying the same shit. Like there should have been more doors, but
Yeah,
more doors, dude.
More doors or less doors or no doors. Right.
Here's the spoiler alert for the real spine crack heads.
Or Mordor, and it's just the Lord of the Rings.
That's right.
Mordor.
That's right.
Mordor. That reminds me of George R. R. Martin's books that I forgot the name of.
Oh, the Game of Thrones
Hodor.
series.
Hodor.
Hodor. Okay.
Mordor.
Okay,
I thought you just started wanting to talk about Game of Thrones suddenly. Now there's a nice political story.
Yes.
I'm never gonna write it. I still gotta make that Twitter. I'm never gonna write it.
It's not gonna happen.
It's not
never
gonna
happening.
I'm gonna die before I write it.
Deal with it.
Guess what I'm doing? Not writing it.
Not writing it. You're never gonna get it.
But here's the one of the meme preview for the real spine crack heads who are still listening.
Yeah.
There will be Portal the game memes involved in this.
Oh, of course.
Sick.
Of course. Yeah. One of the best games ever.
Yeah, play Portal.
Can
And
you
Portal
put a picture of Nightcrawler from X-Men 2 in there?
Sure, why?
Just like, teleporting.
Because he teleports?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
I always a little peek behind the curtain here. I frankly do feel weird about doing memes with people from different ethnicities because I'm like, I would just like in my mind I'm just like, oh, I'll just put Aladdin walking through a portal from the game. I'm just like, oh shit, that's probably not okay.
Yeah. I'll just make Aziz Ansari and he's at the platform 1.75.
No, he's Indian, isn't he?
I know, I'm joking.
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
Okay. But Paul, I do think it's interesting. Like, one way you brought up the Murakami thing, and maybe I'm just being fucking racist and stupid now or something. But what if
You are.
What if he actually used like some Arabian like lore as the magical realism here? Like, what if he actually used fucking magic carpets? Like maybe that would have been interesting.
Well, if he would have had to say that it
Would that have been better? Oh, that he would have had to specify place, I guess, maybe more.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Right. Because, don't say anything, but the city is Lahore, Pakistan, I think.
Maybe. That's where he's from.
Well, I think
that's where he's from.
I think that adds to like the particularity issue we had earlier, though, is that like this does lack particularity, and that was a conscious choice by Hamid. Fuck, I'm such an idiot.
Chill.
But I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
I'm still on the fence about whether the lack of particularity is a problem.
I don't think. I don't think it's a problem, and I think it was a choice that worked in some aspects.
Yeah.
But it also backfired in certain aspects as well.
Yeah.
Like I think he like wrote a line, and he made a choice, but it backfired, and he didn't potentially know how it would backfire.
Yeah, he thought he could open a bunch of doors narratively, but it did close a lot of doors for him.
Nice.
Also,
Nice.
But that also adds to my pop music reference because, like, I think there's a lot more doors that are open for like a general reader. Like, I think this is a great book to read if you're like a boomer. I think,
or like Matt said, like a high school
young
student.
person.
Yeah.
maybe
it
a young
gestures
person, but
towards a lot of areas of inquiry. It gestures towards them. It doesn't. Really
and also
talk
it
that
it
much
also
about
deals
it,
with
but
like young love and everything. But I was also thinking of my dad, who's like also like a pop, like a not a pop music. He's like an old boomer.
he's a pop.
He's like a right. Okay, this is like exclusive content, but he's like a right
No, it
wing
isn't.
guy.
This is going up everywhere, baby.
But he's like a right wing guy that like
Yeah.
I love the man, and he's like a sweet guy, but he has like he'll never listen to this, so I don't care. But he has like inherent weird vibes towards certain ethnic groups, I would say, and I think that
Yeah.
a lot of people from a certain
It's
age
a
probably
nice
do.
way of saying racist.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just trying to think of this as like a general audience type book, and I think that's what it was written.
Yeah,
as.
which is like to circle all the way back to the very fucking beginning of this, which is why it's on the New York Times top 10 read this book this year list.
Yeah. So we can. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't think it's just like what I was nervous about, which is just a sort of like treacly kind of facile take on this stuff. Like I don't think it's that. I think it's like a serious piece of literature, and it didn't quite work for me. But yeah, I see where a sort of general reading audience could benefit a lot from it, and we talked about the educational aspects of it. But I don't know. Do we house these people?
What?
What? House.
In their do we pick their house?
Oh,
Oh.
God. Okay. Whoa. Yeah. That
You're
was
jumping.
subtle.
Okay.
Okay. Well, so just for those
Not
of you
jumping.
who were waiting with bated breath for our new segment about our Scrabble words from this book, we're skipping it.
We forgot.
This week because we all basically forgot.
We
what we're
forgot.
on.
Yeah.
I will say, just on the question of accessibility, right? This book is written very accessibly. Like Paul said, I knew all the words in it, which is maybe a dumb thing to say. But
Me too.
Outside of some of the place names, you know, it's accessible. It's written clearly. Fox, that would be mine. I saw fox in the book, and that's a good Scrabble word always. All right.
I missed it.
Wizard Harry.
You just read a book on refugees, Harry.
How do you feel about it, Harry?
You're a refugee, Harry. Get out of England, Harry.
He kind of is.
Yeah, he is.
And then he becomes CIA at the end.
Big time, big CIA. He works for McKinsey.
You're a
at the
squib,
end.
Harry.
Harry Potter works for McKinsey. He becomes a Kingsman.
So
Y'all know what it is.
we only got 2.
Basically, two. Yeah. Maybe
Where do they
maybe
go?
Sade's father.
Yeah.
So
Sade's
wait,
father?
what segment are we in here, Paul? What are we doing?
We're doing. We just did read another book where we rate the characters in the book into Harry Potter houses, which is Ravenclaw, Slytherin, Hogwarts, or Ravenclaw.
Yes.
Yeah. I think safe to say Hogwarts all around.
Yeah.
Except if
Hogwarts.
you're a squib.
Unless you're a squib, which is a valid category. All
So
right,
I think-
let's talk about Sade's father here a little bit,
Lawful good.
which is what? Hufflepuff? Gryffindor.
Man, I think he's a Hufflepuff.
Okay, why? He can't leave his dead wife and his country to go through the door.
Well, there's the
Or is that Gryffindor,
yeah,
dude? He knows he's gonna die.
No, I think his wife was probably Gryffindor. He was kind of, I don't know. He's just a good, solid, dependable man who likes his community and loves his wife and his son. He's good Hufflepuff because he's if you love something, let it go, and he let Sade go.
If you love something, let
through
it
the
go.
door.
But he couldn't let his wife go
Right. Something.
Yeah, but how could you?
because she's dead.
She's a ghost.
Yeah, but like you're old, and that was like your whole life.
Yeah, I hear.
So
you.
I'm going Hufflepuff, man.
All right.
I think.
I'm gonna go Ravenclaw or Gryffindor. I think it was a brave choice to stay that loyal and choose to die.
He is kind of down with the ship. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I think I'm Gryffindor too.
Like a ship that's a good analogy, like a ship captain going down with the ship.
But he's also like not
Pretty
sentimental
Gryffindor.
about. He encourages Sayed and Nadia to leave. He's very like stoic about that. He's like, you guys got to get the fuck out of here. But yeah, like you said, I'm going down with the ship.
All right, I'm flipping. I'm Gryffindor now too.
Trip Griff.
Sick.
Yes.
Trip
10
Griff.
points.
3 of a
Gryffindor.
kind.
Oh god,
So stupid. It's
one of
the segment is so stupid. I love
Yeah,
it.
it is stupid.
one of these days when we have way too much time on our hands, we're gonna have to go back and figure out how many people we've put in each house.
Oh,
Oh,
God,
good
no.
Lord.
Yeah,
That's reserved for like the fans of the show.
that's good. That's like $100 a month Patreon only.
Or if some weirdo wants to just do it.
Yeah, once we have enough money to hire a YouTube editor or something for clips.
We don't have to hire anybody. If just we need all it takes is one obsessed person.
Come on, we know you're out there, and we know you're listening. You're the right person.
Yeah, because you're obsessed and you'll do
Yeah,
it,
and you
and you
love
will
us.
do it, and you love it, and you will do it.
All right, let's talk about Sade.
I think he's a Hufflepuff.
Yeah,
I think he's
Huff
like
maybe that.
very-
Yeah, he's the Huff.
Yeah, I think he's like very loyal to his family dynamics and his religion, and he can't let it go. And that, like, I think he like structures his whole identity on that. Yeah, and I feel like he's actually like he rarely seems to be brave ever. So it takes away from my potential thought that he'd be Gryffindor. So I think he's like a pretty strong Hufflepuff for me.
Yeah, I think part of that is like him needing that structure because, like a lot of people, he isn't naturally quite as like loyal and good as he wants to be in his like idealized form. But that being said, it's still I think he's still a puff as well.
Yeah, I'm right there with y'all. I have a hard time thinking of any argument other than puff. 10
Trip
points for
puff.
Hufflepuff.
10 points
10
for
points for
Hufflepuff.
Hufflepuff.
Anytime we're all in agreement, that house gets 10 points.
Hell yeah.
Now
New
Nadia,
New rule.
Nadia's Gryffindor to me.
Ooh.
Yes. Strong. Maybe one of the strongest Gryffindors.
She's been doing what she's wanted to do despite potentially mortal danger, even within her own country, by leaving her family and just kind of doing whatever she wants, ride a motorcycle. I
Is
mean,
that
come
We
on.
never even talked about how she like chose to wear robes even though she didn't like have to, which I thought
No,
was
we
like a
didn't
really
mention that,
interesting
which is epic.
characterization.
Yeah, she's being tricky. She's by the end of it.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
But okay, so from just to play devil's advocate here,
Uh-huh.
from like a trad perspective, is she the Slytherin embodiment of like Western decadence? Just do whatever you want all the time and just follow your base impulses.
Goodness.
It's a good question.
Just kind of
I don't know.
just kind of out I wouldn't say she's out for herself in like a sort of conniving way or anything, But I do think, like you said, she's kind of like, unencumbered and kind of, I'm gonna do me.
I think you're right, and I think it is interesting in that sense because of how she's written it felt to me to just sit within the context of like modern like Western countries easier,
Right.
by not having any sort of like affiliation culturally and being kind of a rootless cosmopolitan at heart, like Hamid himself. So shit, I don't know. I'm gonna say shitty Gryffindor, then.
Or is she a Ravenclaw, searching for new experiences and understandings?
No, I mean, if she was a Ravenclaw, she would be more invested in some type of artistic or scientific medium.
They met at school.
Yeah, but she didn't
For
like
branding.
that.
It's like going to business school and being like, wow.
I'm a Ravenclaw now.
Yeah, I'm a Ravenclaw
You can't
now. I'm
be
a sapiosexual.
Right, yeah. I don't feel as strongly about that. I was just throwing it out there. I do feel like the
Slytherin.
I do feel like the Slytherin question is real, though.
It looms large, and I am conflicted, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna say like a sort of sour Gryffindor.
I think that she has enough moments of like being extremely brave, and I think bravery is such a high attribute in the Gryffindor house, according to the Sorting Hat.
But isn't in the context of Gryffindor, isn't it like bravery for the sake of others, though? Like it's not like
I don't know.
it's not like it's like like James Dean was brave, arguably, just drunk driving super fast down the road. Like I don't give a fuck. Like I wouldn't call that Gryffindor.
No, but I mean,
is.
Draco Malfoy was a little fucking wimp, and he was a Slytherin, and never showed bravery towards anyone, not even himself.
But Snape was brave.
And a Slytherin.
Not a Slytherin, so.
Yeah, but he also
But that was
had a
also
very
brave
different-
for the sake of
Checkmate.
Harry.
He also had a very different view of love.
It's true.
I'm sorry that you take the L. Checkmate.
Me?
Snape. Yeah.
No way, dude.
Yeah, Paul, you might have to take the L.
You might have to take the L.
How? I missed it. If there was a point that was made.
Snape.
Snape was your point. Okay. I mean, Snape
James Dean
loved
James
one
Dean,
person.
Dude. James Dean was my point.
Drunk driving and Snape.
Disagree.
Okay, I'm going with like chill, cool Slytherin.
I'm going with
Sterner.
Gryffindor. Brave
Yeah,
person. Followed her own ideals, but not in a Slytherin way. I mean, she doesn't have any ties to her family. That's a big Slytherin attribute that Gabe has reiterated many times on this segment.
She's not ambitious. I know.
She's not ambitious. She's just fucking brave.
I know. This is a
And
complicated
gay.
one. Bi.
She's bi.
Bye.
And she's saying bye to Sade.
That's big facts.
And she's kissing the cook.
She said bye-bye to say
bye bye.
bye-bye.
Sad. And then
Sade, you're so sad.
God, that's dumb too. Yeah, I think she's just probably like a bit of a bad Gryffindor, like
All
kind of a Gryffindor with some bad tendencies.
All
Though.
right.
All right, 5 points for Gryffindor, not 10.
No, it has to be unanimous.
Seems like
No.
5 at least.
Yeah.
It would be like 6.66 at best.
Yeah.
Oh, that's even
true.
better than 5, so
Fine,
6.
that's fine.
It's satanic.
3.33 for Slytherin.
Fine. We all get what we
I'm
want.
not mad.
I'm
No,
not mad.
you just gave us more points, but all right.
Dude, I'm calmer than you are.
He gave us the mark of the beast.
All right, let's rack them up. Let's rack them up and score this bad boy.
Dib's not first.
That's Matt.
All right. Yeah.
I
mean,
automatically get to go last for those of you who don't know, because the person that picked the book goes last.
Yes, we decided this pretty organically right at the beginnings for some reason. Yeah, I don't like. I feel like we've all been pretty clearly. I don't know. Like in the. I was definitely feeling a kind of. It's a pleasant read. I was a little bit disappointed, and didn't think that like all the elements hung together very well. Ultimately, for the sake of it, for my taste. And so it just lands fairly square in the sort of like pleasantly meh line of scoring. So I'm going to give it like what would that fucking be? I'm going to give it like a 3.1 or something like that. I think 3.1, yeah.
Bet.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I love the writing, really. It was just like,
Yeah.
it was fantastic. The relationship elements to me were just like so on the nose and beautiful that those two elements alone, like they increase the points, but like almost everything else in terms of the structure of the narrative doesn't fall apart, but it's like there's something that's like there's a lot of friction between it.
Mm-hmm.
I think my initial thought was like 3.6 before we started the discussion. I think I'm gonna stay around there. I'm gonna say 3.4.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah,
Right, Gabriel.
I think you've both expressed a lot of my feelings about it too. You know, I was I was pleasantly surprised with how the book kind of won me over in some ways based on where I was coming into it from mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, yeah.
And just kind of what I was expecting. And I think as you've both said, I think the kind of core story of Sayed and Nadia is really excellent, and there's like beautiful moments, and we all can fucking feel it in deep ways in this room, and probably everyone can.
Except if you're an incel.
I'm an incel.
No, except if you are.
Oh
an
yeah,
incel,
if you're an incel,
then you can't
yeah,
feel
you
it.
Can't feel it because you've never
Fucking
felt
loser.
love or the touch of another.
Yeah.
And no, shout outs to our incel audience if you're out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you in a lot of ways. So, wink, wink.
But
Winkies for you.
But yeah, no, I mean, as we've all said, a lot of the stuff some of the stuff didn't click. Didn't love the Doors. I'm obsessed with the Doors, and I'm worried about the Doors in various ways.
I'm obsessed
I'm glad
with
that
them.
you're
I
not
hate
talking
them.
about. I'm glad you're not talking about the actual band, The Doors.
Definitely not obsessed with them. The Doors
They're
are
the fucking
overrated.
worst. I hate
Big
The Doors.
time overrated. So, honestly, Matt, you hit it directly on the head for me. It's like a 3.1. It's straight
Okay.
on.
Yeah, straight on till morning, dude.
Like,
Yeah.
I think it's good, and I think give it a read, and yeah.
So you guys are together on this, and I'm on the outside.
We've had way more divergent scores before. This is within 0.3 points.
Paul's on the outside. He's looking in. He can see clearly. No, you're not, dude. You're not that far out. We're all kind of the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I boosted it up a little bit because of the. I really did think the writing was great, and the love story.
This is a Paul book.
Hit
This
me
is
right in the
This is a
heart.
classic Paul book.
Yeah, but it's not great for me either. It's
Right.
not like I gave it a 4.4.
I know.
You know,
No, you did the right thing.
I did the right thing.
You did the objectively correct thing.
Yeah.
I did the objectively correct thing and gave Altered States a 0.5 too because that book sucked balls. Fuck that book, Matt.
I don't care.
Clearly,
You're not going to
Paul's
hurt my feelings,
Paul's
man. I
clearly,
don't care.
Paul's not mad. Dude. Paul has not lost any sleep over it.
I don't
Well,
care. I'll keep hitting you with. I can't wait for how much you're not.
next
going
week. Next week is going to be epic.
I'm torturing Paul by proxy with this podcast. Essentially,
Tune in. Definitely tune in next week for some potential Paul fireworks and a very special guest.
Yeah,
indeed.
so it'll be a special guest, Gabe and Matt, and you'll have a great time.
and Paul Rage. Some Paul Rage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
you
more
won't
mic
like me-
peaking than you've ever heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, you won't like me when I'm angry.
I love you when you're angry, baby.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
do. It's probably my favorite. Your favorite form of me.
You get a healthy flush to you.
Yes. Well, thanks for
Another
listening,
one
everybody.
down.
Another one in the bucket. We are closing in on 52 episodes, which is going to be a year. This is number 41. Or no, this is 42.
42.
Yeah, we're 10 episodes off of 52 episodes, which is a year.
We should have
Dang.
read that British book about sci-fi elements.
What?
Put it on the list.
No, where they talk about number 42 being the most perfect number. What is that?
Oh,
It's
the
like
Douglas Adams.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
We should have read that book for this one.
Yeah, dude, that would have been. Yeah, that would have been because of the. It would have been the same, so that would have been good.
Yeah.
It would have been the same number in the book. So.
All right,
we're gonna
everyone.
miss.
Thanks
Yeah.
for listening.
Thank you so much.
Go to our
Bye.
Patreon and YouTube and Twitter and Instagram.
Please
Yeah.
patron us.
Do it. And you can join our Discord, which is sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. We should probably open that up to non-patrons.
I don't know.
We'll wait. We don't let the hogs
We're going
in.
to give it a minute. We're going to give it a minute.
Yeah. Let it simmer.
Yeah. All right, y'all. We love you.
Mwah.